The Black Mesa Incident. When people talk about its consequences, they usually talk about the alien invasion or the Combine. However, what they rarely talk about is what happened to all of the scientists working at the facility. Playing through Half-Life, you of course see what happened to most of them. The majority were either killed by the Xenian invaders or eliminated by the HECU. It is only a few of them that actually escaped, most notably Eli Vance and Isaac Kleiner, as well as a couple other staff members like Dr. Brina and Barney Calhoun. But what if the rest weren't all killed? What if the HECU wasn't ordered to eliminate everyone and instead imprison them? That's where Half-Life Caged comes in, a mod for, well, obviously Half-Life, developed by Future Games Select and released in 2017. Its premise is pretty straightforward, putting you into the shoes of an inmate trying to escape from a high-security military prison. It's also not very long. I'd say a first playthrough would take you somewhere around 40 minutes, but it very much makes up for all of that in pure quality and, of course, being free 99. Add to that a couple of secrets and ARG elements, and I think you'd be missing out not playing it. Having said that, I do want to make clear this video will have spoilers. So if you do want to experience this game blind, I suggest you do so before watching the rest. Of course, I'd really appreciate it if you'd stick around, but no hard feelings. Anyway, I think it's time we got into what Caged actually is. We do have quite a bit to cover, and I am sort of running on a deadline, so let's get into it. Before jumping into the actual game though, I think it'd be best to first take a look at its description, because it does essentially answer some questions about what Caged is. Future Games Select and Kyle George bring you a compact prison escape like no other. Featuring explosive action and a soundtrack from Outrun music legend Laserhawk, Half-Life Caged is a return to the golden age of first-person shooters. Break from captivity, conquer the facility, and discover the secrets of Half-Life Caged. So there it is. Wrap it up, right? It's just a simple jailbreak game on the original Half-Life engine. The description doesn't have any elaborate references or ambiguous hints. In fact, like 20% of the description is dedicated to its soundtrack, which is killer, by the way. Well, while the description might not be as complex as, say, Minerva Metastasis, it also doesn't really give a lot away in terms of what the game contains. It refers to unlockable bonus content, but doesn't tell you what it actually is. One big thing to note here though is that it doesn't at all reference Half-Life. As a matter of fact, throughout the game I don't think there's a single direct reference to the events at Black Mesa. So then, why did I start the video by referring to them? That's because personally I do think it takes place in the same universe. In fact, I'm certain of it. It's just that the environment and the content hints at it instead of outright slamming it on the table. I mean, for one, it is called Half-Life Caged, not just Caged. Also, when we finally get into the game, the characters you see around you will be mostly scientists and HECU soldiers, and even a Barney Calhoun. But of course, these could all be trivialities. The Half-Life in the title could simply be referring to the game it's a mod of, and the character models can be chalked up to development decisions or limitations. But I don't think that's the case. In fact, there is actually a mod of Caged called Recaged, released about a year after the original, and it does change the guard and inmate models to more generic ones. So clearly it was possible. And I don't think future games would have been incapable of that themselves if they wanted to. Ultimately, there are more hints, which I will go into as we go along. But for now, this is all the description gives us. Or doesn't, I guess. While we're here though, there is actually one more thing. Yeah, I know, just get into the game, dude, but bear with me. On the game's Steam page, there is an item store. To be honest, I don't think I've ever really seen a store like this on a game before, so it did draw my attention and I had a look at what the listings were. Essentially, they're just PNGs, or NFTs, I guess, of various caged-themed objects, like a floppy disk and a virtual game case. And one of them, the Nuclear Virtual Display Box, is listed at around $10. I think that's a pretty hefty price for a PNG about a Half-Life mod. But that's not even the most ridiculous part. If you take a look under the description of the item, you'll see that this $10 tradable token has been listed on the community market for €43. Why? This thing is not exclusive. You can't buy it for the retail price on the game's Steam page. Why would you buy it for 4 times the price from some random guy? Who would even try to sell it? There is one single listing for it on the whole marketplace, and it's the $40 one. Anyway, that's my whole rant about the Cage store. And that's also the last thing I wanted to address before getting into the game, so here we go. The game starts off with probably the hardest intro to a Half-Life mod I've ever seen, presenting an incredibly well-modeled retro computer room in a light that fits the vintage equipment perfectly against a track that, look, I know I'm gushing over the intro sequence, but come on, how could you not? On one of the computers, you see the status of various systems being assessed, but more importantly, you actually see your own intake form being filled out. One thing to note here is that your violation is left as unknown, which is something that we'll learn more about later on. Before the screen fades to black, one last message flashes on the monitor. Scheduled termination at 00. And checking the time at the top of the screen, that is in 9 minutes. The first chapter, called Scheduled Termination, starts in, you're not gonna believe this, a jail cell. More specifically, cell E3, as you could see in the intro sequence, as well as on the wall in front of you. Your cellmates are 3 other scientist-looking individuals, each more desperate to get out than the other. And on the other side of the bars, you can see HECU soldiers patrolling around. Looking around the cell, on one of the walls, you'll find 2 faucets, one for water and the other for G-Fuel. Gruel. This game's version of prison slop, which actually also acts as shield power-ups throughout the game in the form of gruel cans. Other unique features of this jail cell are Ratatouille's third cousin and a bucket labeled toilet. Now, assuming you don't want to wait for your scheduled termination, you'll probably instantly be looking around for the way out. In this case, it comes in the form of a pressure valve on one of the pipes, which you can reach using these boxes that for some reason are part of the cell. Interacting with the valve will cause the pressure to build up and the pipe to explode, revealing a hole in the floor. However, some of the side effects of this explosion are killing any scientists nearby, and also triggering the alarm to which the HECU soldiers immediately start shooting you. Jumping down the hole, you'll end up in the maintenance tunnels of the prison, where you'll find the most vital tool in your escape, a plunger, this game's version of the crowbar. One of the DLCs you can buy for Caged is actually something called Executive Plunger, which adds a plaque reading Executive to the in-game item for the low price of $3. You can probably buy a real plunger for that price. Anyway, after making your way through some air vents and broken ducts, you'll eventually come across that fat-ass rat again, who in this case broke the ladder you could have probably taken to progress. On top of that, the HECU will also be throwing grenades into the vents, showing their desperation in not letting anyone escape. Don't worry, they get even crazier. In the next section, you'll have to jump across a bottomless pit onto ladders, which in Half-Life games is probably the most trust you could ever put into something. Finally, you come up to a large room filled with water. This is actually a puzzle very similar to a few you'd find in Half-Life 2, except that game was known for its revolutionary water physics, while Half-Life wasn't. Keep that in mind. Essentially, to solve it, you have to turn a valve, opening a hatch which releases a couple of boxes you can jump across to get to the exit. You also have to, however, interact with a lever which raises the fluid level. The fun part about this puzzle is that you can complete it in any order. What I mean is that if you interact with the lever first, for instance, like I did, the water level will rise and you'll now have to dive deeper in order to turn the valve. While if you do it the other way, it essentially takes less time. It is, of course, a minor thing, but it actually reminds me of a Resident Evil game, where you could take things you learned in previous playthroughs to complete the game more efficiently in the next. That last puzzle was essentially the end of Chapter 1, putting you now in Chapter 2, Turret Unwellness. This first section is in fact another puzzle which you have multiple ways to complete. Well, in actuality, one way, but who doesn't like the illusion of free choice? You're basically met with three paths, two of them leading you to instant death, while one of them will make the others safe. Two other things you'll find are that fucking rat again, and also a popping tune coming from the other side of the wall. That is actually one of a few stereos you'll come across throughout the game, and they will be important later on. Going the correct way here, you'll find out what the name of the chapter means. That's because the Turret Unwellness system, which you could also see a sign about in the cell at the beginning, refers to the automatic turret system throughout the facility, a system which you have to disarm if you want to progress. After taking out the HECU soldiers sanitation style, you can also activate the riot alarm, another thing which you have to do because it clears the guards blocking your way forward. It also changes the atmosphere from calm, quiet prison escape to loud, tense jailbreak. So if you're playing at 3 AM and don't want to wake the spirits, turn your volume down. At this point, you can progress forward. However, there is also a small service closet which was previously protected by the turret system that you can now access. There's not much in there, apart from the stereo I was talking about and some gruel in the boxes, but again, this room is important for a certain reason I'll talk about towards the end. In the other room, the one where the guards were before, is an armory which you can gain access to by picking up the keycard on one of the tables, allowing you to grab some more SMG ammo, a shotgun, and grenades. Other things to note in this room are the second stereo and also the panels on the walls. One of the panels shows a few of the prison's system warnings, the active ones being the ones you just triggered, the turret system and the riot alarm. The others will also be relevant later on, apart from the gruel one. That one's a joke. The other one shows the lockdown status, with your cell, E3, being the only one active. The only way to go here is cell block D, and the hallway is guarded by a few HECU soldiers you'll have to take out. In this corridor there is actually another alternate path, which I did notice on my first playthrough, but I didn't realize how to get to. I sound like a broken record, but yeah, it's important later on. Just bear with me, it'll all come together. Also this way is the way to the infirmary, where you'll find a scientist laying on one of the beds. He's also important. You know what, actually, if you see anything in this game, it's probably important later on, alright? One thing that is important right now though is the crossbow you find here, alongside a few tranquilizer darts, which are in fact the only darts you'll find throughout the game, so use them wisely. I actually had a lot of trouble in this section, both on normal and hard mode, mostly because for some reason, whenever I play a Half-Life game for the first time, I always end up playing most of it on 1 HP, meaning I mash my quick save key harder than potatoes on Thanksgiving. To my defense, there's quite a few difficult enemies here, including a shotgun grunt and a trigger-happy guy with a grenade launcher. I also feel like the Half-Life combat system isn't the best with these types of encounters. Most of the time it feels like enemies will shoot you the nanosecond you peek a corner, making it almost impossible to not trade damage. This is not a criticism about the mod though, it's just the way Valve coded the AI. Taking the elevator down to Cell Block D, you'll be greeted by two guards who, for whatever reason, don't shoot you on the spot, but rather run a few feet down the hallway instead. On the cell block, you actually have another small combat encounter, where two soldiers rappel down from the ceiling and another two rain bullets and grenades from above. The crossbow is great here, letting you take out a couple before triggering the others. Another thing to note here is the prisoners. More specifically, the fact that, for whatever reason, if you take cover away from the Heku soldiers, they'll start shooting them instead. They're no threat, you can't really break them out, so again, it just shows how crucial it is to them that none of the scientists get away. Also, banana. Important. There's another illusionary choice here, with two accessible paths being the North Yard or the shower room. If you pick the North Yard, you're met with a bunch of HECU soldiers, and even if you manage to take them out, it pretty much leads to a dead end. That's because the way you want to go is actually through the showers. Not something you'd really say in a real prison. Platforming up to the observation deck above the showers will lead you into the next chapter. In the third chapter, named The Yard, your objective is opening the main gate of the prison, which is located in, well, the yard. To use the gate control terminal though, you'll have to activate it. And the way to do this is by turning the auxiliary keys in Watchtowers 1 and 2 looking over, you guessed it, the yard. This whole chapter is pretty much an extensive combat encounter. Everything from the control terminal to the watchtowers to the yard itself, god, I'm gonna have nightmares about that word, is heavily protected by Heku forces. Upon opening the main gate, a security van drives in and deploys even more guards, as well as a couple of turrets, but thankfully also supplies. All things considered, this is probably the shortest chapter in Caged. After fighting the soldiers in the, you know what, you know where. All you have to do is swipe your card in the main gate chamber and you're on to the next chapter. That being said, there are a couple of additional paths you can explore, a couple of vents that lead to certain secrets, but the most relevant one you can find right now is the third and last stereo. Finding all of the stereos will be very important later on, so I hope you've been keeping a track of them. Jet Boat Escape is the fourth and final chapter of the game, and it plays out as a last battle against the HECU's last-ditch efforts to stop you. Straight away, as the main gate rolls up to reveal the outside world, you'll probably spot your main objective. The beautifully lit, weirdly off-theme jet boat that looks more like something ripped straight out of Vice City. However, arguably more important for the moment is what spots you, which is a heavily armed attack helicopter. Making your way through the HECU soldiers and hopefully successfully dodging the helicopter artillery, you might just catch a glimpse of the sign above the prison gate reading Penitentiary Northwest Rock Island. Unfortunately, after a quick Google, there doesn't appear to be a real place called anything like that. Definitely not a prison. The closest thing I could find is something by the name of Northwest Rock, an island off the southeast coast of Australia. Well, island is generously put, it's literally a rock in the middle of the ocean. If you're confused, don't worry. Pepe the Frog was too 5 years ago, and he's the local guy. Needless to say, I doubt this rock has anything to do with the name of the prison, so sadly there's not really any way of knowing where exactly it's located. The only thing we can tell is that it's probably in some sort of tropical climate, and that's just by judging by the palm trees. Getting back to the tense last stand, you'll eventually get to a set of double doors where a couple of guards will yell out that they know you're there. They shoot through the door before finally breaking it down, allowing you to take them out and gain access to the control room. The whole purpose of this room is to activate a lever just outside in the hallway, which in turn controls the armored windows, allowing you to get out on the roof. Fortunately, the helicopter that's been bothering you until now won't be a problem for long, because a bit further on you'll come across the Escape Countermeasures, or RPG as most would probably know it by. Depending on what difficulty you're playing on, it will take a certain amount of missiles to take out the helicopter. 1 on easy, 2 on normal, and 3 on hard. What I will say is, don't worry about where you destroy the helicopter. On my first playthrough it crashed right into the escape boat and nothing happened. So I think you're good. To progress towards the end of the game, you'll have to once again crawl through a series of vents, one of which has 500 kiloton of salvation scribbled on the wall. Definitely nothing to worry about. To finally get to the boat, you'll have to turn a valve to open a door. But more importantly, you'll have to fight off a second helicopter, which if you still have enough missiles shouldn't be a problem. But if you don't, well, luckily regular guns do still deal damage to it, so even if you can't just weaken it with 1 or 2 missiles, you should be able to blow it up regardless. However, important to note, interacting with the valve will trigger the prison's actually, this time for real, really real, escape countermeasures in the form of a thermonuclear auto-destruct. Aside from the graffiti in the vent, if you'd been paying attention, you probably have noticed a few references to some thermonuclear weapon around the prison. As it turns out, this is what it's for. The government probably considers an escape from this facility so dangerous that it would rather detonate a nuclear bomb to prevent it than let anyone get away. Sound familiar? In Half-Life Opposing Force, it is exactly a thermonuclear warhead that Shepard tries to disarm at the Black Mesa facility, a warhead which had been planted by none other than the US military operatives, a final measure to ensure that anybody who might know anything about what happened at the facility would be wiped out. In my opinion, this further proves that the events of Caged are an aftermath of the Black Mesa incident. But again, the mod doesn't outright confirm it, although it kinda does. Bear with me. Jumping into the motorboat prompts the end of the game. You've successfully escaped the prison, which you can see detonate in the background as the credits roll over a sunrise that would make the GTA 6 trailer jealous. Donning a sick lab coat in an awesome jet boat, the screen fades to black. The end. But not really. In the post-credits scene, you can see an achievement called Nuclear Sunrise unlock, and in addition you can see a panel of displays labeled Achievement Status. These are game achievements, and you can probably tell there are 6 of them. Sort of. There is actually an armored door tagged Top Secret Do Not Open, with 6 lights below it which will open once all achievements are unlocked. However, more importantly, who is that handsome fella at the bottom right? In the introduction I did refer to some Barney Calhouns, and although it might not be him, they did all look the same in Half-Life. It is a guard wearing the Black Mesa security uniform. I think this pretty much confirms the connection between Half-Life 1 and Caged, if anyone had been doubting it until now. You could have argued about the HECU, maybe the dev just didn't want to make another model, but including a Black Mesa guard specifically is a little on the nose. This, in my opinion, means that in that case, you're a Black Mesa scientist. But if you're still not convinced, there might still be a small piece of evidence right towards the end. Going back to the achievement status panel, the achievements you can see are Carson's Hideout, Flatline Fiasco, Nuclear Sunrise, Banana Bandit, Ghetto Blaster Blaster, and Refreshment Rustler. You can in fact also see these achievements as soon as opening the game, as they do show up in the main menu screen in the top left. However, apart from the names, they're not really very self-explanatory. At least, some of them aren't. Going one by one, the way these achievements are unlocked are as follows. Carson's hideout is literally a hideout in an event early in the game, and discovering it will pop the achievement. Flatline Fiasco has to do with the scientist in the infirmary, who you have to kill to unlock it. Nuclear Sunrise is the most ambiguous of them all. I'll let you figure that one out yourselves. Banana Bandit is unlocked by breaking into the cell where that random banana was and stealing it from that guy. Ghetto Blaster is triggered by destroying all of the stereos in the game, which is why I've been telling you about all of them all along. And lastly, Refreshment Rustler is unlocked by destroying a vending machine in the break room in Chapter 3. And that's all the marked achievements. The marked achievements. You might remember that vent I didn't know how to get to in Chapter 2. Well, in my second playthrough of the game, I figured it out. It turns out what you have to do is use a box to climb onto the breakers on the wall, allowing you to reach it. Through here, you'll find a secret room where something called the VATS is. No, I'm not talking about the aimbot system of the Fallout games, I'm talking about the Vocal Announcement Test System, our 7th achievement. As you can probably tell straight away, the VATS is equipped with two buttons, A and B, and pressing those buttons in a particular order will activate the test sequence of the VATS. However, pressing them in the wrong order will lock down the system. You'll have to reload the previous save to try again. So how do you know what the right order is? Well, in the same room there is actually a technical manual which you can interact with, but doesn't really do anything. But if you instead interact with your eyes, you'll see a link to ipcscorp.com. This is an actual domain purely dedicated to Caged. On the website, you'll in fact see a lot of information about various systems in the facility, including the Vocal Announcement Test System, but also the Turret Prisoner Wellness System and 500 kiloton thermonuclear compliance device. All of these have some description of their functionalities and key features, but VATS also contains some additional documentation in the form of a PDF. This is where the codes can be found, hidden among all the technical mumbo-jumbo. I really like the inclusion of this third-party website because it does give the game this added layer of immersion. And it's so well done that it really does feel like you're peeking into some sort of classified media. The document on VATS specifically is very convincing, looking very much like an old, partially destroyed scan of a record. That being said, we're not completely done with the IPCS website just yet. We will come back to it a bit later on. Inputting the factory codes into the VATS will successfully run through its testing sequence, but also trigger an interaction which, well, to be honest, I'm a bit unsure if I'd be allowed to post it on YouTube, but essentially, the machine gains consciousness and asks you for some company. Successfully satisfying the VATS will exhaust its dialogue, giving you your cue to leave. However, doing that will upset the computer, which promptly self-destructs, granting you the 7th and final achievement, Artificial Affection. All you have to do now is make sure you complete the run with all of these achievements, and you'll unlock the top secret bonus content, which pretty much comes in the form of an epilogue 24 hours before the events of Caged. The screen fades to reveal an elevator in which you're accompanied by two HECU soldiers, establishing the fact that you've already been apprehended and brought to the prison. The floor you arrive on is S34, and by the looks of things, it seems to be the prisoner intake room. Across the glass shield, the Black Mesa guard says something completely unintelligible. Apart from references to an elevator, yeah, genius, and being right on time. He then interacts with a terminal that opens a door to the processing facility. However, before moving on, another thing you can find in this room is a notice board containing a few rules you most definitely shouldn't break. One of them is not smoking, so if you're a vape bro, that's probably worse than being in prison in the first place. A second is not abusing the service bell. Channeling my Black Mesa scientist character, I decided to experiment with this rule, which this Barney wasn't very happy about. Not breaking the rules, and instead going through the doors to the processing facility, ends you up in front of a big wall called Judgment Bot 9000. I think you can already guess what this is. In the IPCS manual, there was in fact an entry about the Judgment Bot, at the very bottom under Special of the Month, and the information about it describes it as providing 24-hour electronic impartiality, but also a pneumatic morality core. Now, where have you heard about morality cores before? Well, if you've played Portal, you'd probably know exactly where. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, because I already have a video talking about Portal on this channel. Check out that one about Portal Revolution. Selfless plug, sponsored by myself. And I won't put myself through that pain again. Long story short, morality cores are an Aperture Science invention, and they're conscious machines capable of carrying a personality as well as an entire science facility. This is yet another drop in the ocean of references to the Half-Life universe, so if you still think Caged is not tied to it, I don't know what to tell you. This Judgment Bot segment is pretty much an algorithmic system in which it will ask you a couple of questions and you have to pick an answer from two choices. The first thing it will ask you is to confirm your inmate identity number, and using the console in front of you, you can either answer yes or no. Answering no will trigger the default judgment sequence, i.e., vaporization. Not really what you want. Answering yes will progress the dialogue. Judgment Bot then proceeds to process your violation, which turns out to be classified. How convenient. I do want to note some of the other violations, because you do get the standard trespassing and identity theft, but you do also get some rather unorthodox charges, such as limp handshake, capri pants, and Canadian. The Judgment Bot will now ask you for your plea, providing you with the options of guilty or innocent. Not really a yes or no question, but in this case picking no will plea not innocent, which is in fact the same outcome as picking yes, which simply pleads guilty. Pretty accurate representation of real life, I guess. The sentencing is then chosen from a selection of equally interesting options, like group therapy or cement shoes. But your sentence will always be imprisonment. However, much like in Las Vegas, there's always a small chance of a jackpot, and today's your lucky day because you receive a bonus sentence, scheduled termination. But it could be worse. You could have been ridiculed or even gotten a $20 fine. Fortunately, you are once again given the chance to confirm or deny your sentence, and much like me, your instinct would most likely be to reject. However, that sadly doesn't mean they just let you walk out. That would be way too realistic. Instead, you're forced to proceed to inmate disposal. Unhappy with the no option, you'd probably go back to selecting the yes option, which accepts your sentence, the canonically correct choice which leads you to the canonic elevator to the canonic and of the epilogue. And with that, you've essentially seen everything Caged has to offer, or at least everything I decided to cover. There are still a few things I've left out because I didn't consider them necessary, and I do think if you haven't played the game, you really should, but that's pretty much the gist of it. Apart from the developer commentary mode. This game mode is, as it implies, a playthrough containing a couple of notes left by Kyle George about various aspects and fun facts of the game. There's a couple of interesting things he touches on, such as how he went about programming the water puzzle, considering the absence of any water physics in the original Half-Life, as well as a funny anecdote on how the implementation of soundtracks used to work for old Half-Life mods, back when it all used to run on discs. Once again, I do really suggest you play through this mode on your own and give the notes a listen. They provide a lot of interesting information on not just how Caged was built, but also his inspiration, his experience modding, and a lot of other fun stories. I'd love to talk about all of them, but I think that would probably double the video's runtime. And that's about it for Half-Life Caged. As I said, I chose this mod just because I was quickly trying to cover something to make up for the dead time since my last upload, but I was really pleasantly surprised by all it had to offer, even though the experience itself is about 40 minutes. I think the gameplay is great, making use of a lot of unique features despite being built off of the bare bones back of Half-Life 1. The level design really complemented it, especially the early segments of crawling through the bounds of the prison, which, much like George himself referenced, felt a lot like some prison break movies, such as Shawshank Redemption or Shutter Island. I also feel like the secrets were also very well crafted, going as far as to hide an entire website with dedicated PDFs and information about each intricate component of the game behind an unassuming vent in a secret portion of the map, which itself triggers a secret post-credit sequence, once again impressively well realized. Overall, I think the mod is very successful in what it tries to achieve. It delivers a high adrenaline action movie-esque plot with some very polished gameplay and, of course, masterfully mixed soundtrack courtesy of Laserhawk. The fact that I've never heard of this mod and only found out about it searching for some Half-Life hidden gems is in itself a crime worthy of being locked up on Northwest Rock Island. I'm very happy to have come across it, because I would have never thought a Half-Life 1 mod could feel so modern. That being said, I am terrible at writing conclusions, so I have no idea how to properly sign this video off, other than for the 11th time urge you to play Caged yourself. It is, after all, completely free on Steam and ModDB, as long as you own the original Half-Life. As for you, I do really want to thank you for watching the video. It really means a lot. If you've gotten this far, I would of course really appreciate if you'd leave the video a like and maybe even subscribe. I do want to get more consistent with these uploads, but I guess that's just a cookie cutter YouTuber promise. At the end of the day, this is a passion for me and it very much depends on how much free time I have after my actual work. I also want to let you all know that, for one, I do stream on Twitch a lot more consistently than I upload. And I also have a Discord server where I post updates and chat with everybody about mostly anything. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.